apps. Apps are opening up geospatial technology to the masses, really. People are looking at these. The JHU COVID map and dashboard, that's an app, right? And trillions, with a T, of views have occurred. So almost everybody with a device around the world has seen that at least once, with a tablet, a laptop, a phone. Why? Because it's so useful. And you have access to that same technology with this ArcGIS platform. The Landsat Explorer, we don't have time to actually look at that right now, but it's multi-band, so I can also do time comparisons. And like the Wayback Imagery, I have a level 2 capability where I can actually bring that data into a more fully functional GIS for further analysis. Also, I think it's important to highlight an aspect of modern geotechnology, and that is connecting pieces of the platform. So in this case, here's one example. I, as a geographer, care about walkable communities. And in the days when I was traveling around to 30 odd or so campuses a year, I was very tenacious about going for a walk, even if it was difficult, even if there was no shoulder, and very pedestrian unfriendly places. But most of them were actually pedestrian friendly if they were college towns. But in this case, I've got a walkability story map. I got this question at the beginning. Hey, is this place walkable or not? This is a small community. I was there for the South Dakota GIS conference. You might recognize the Corn Palace in the background. Interesting piece of geography there. And so, yeah, sorry, Doug. Anyway, the point is this place walkable or not? Interesting to speculate. Here's my story map on walkability. And then I have in here a survey 123 in this case, which I've crowdsourced. And I've said, hey, what about the following? I'm going to survey the general public. I'm going to make it crowdsourced. I'm going to say, is this pedestrian friendly or unfriendly? Tick all the choices that describe it. Is it walkable or not walkable? Horrible to excellent or somewhere in between? Where is it? And do you have a photograph of it? Interesting. And the results of that survey are now get automatically fed to my live interactive web map, where I can say, hey, what people have submitted their survey results to, excellent for pedestrians in this particular place on the planet. And then the bottom part of that survey, that story map and that dash is a dashboard. So it's the same technology as the JHU COVID dashboard. Roughly 3/4 of the points in my walkability survey had been deemed by the people filling out the survey as being walkable. And you can see a couple of other pie charts and my interactive map and my gauge showing me that there's 607 people that have 607 survey points that have responded to the walkability survey. So that's a connection between different pieces of this platform. Now, you and I have technologies that we use that are disconnected to anything else, right? Certain apps on your phone or certain pieces of technology on your tablet or laptop, and they're not connected to anything else. And that's okay. I've got a photo editing program that I've used, Earthenview, from a programmer in Germany for sehr gut for about 25 years. It's 4 megabytes in size. It's not connected to anything else, but it does what I want it to do. Crop photos, one-touch editing, etc. But the advantage here is that you're connecting pieces of the platform for further power. So in that case of the walkability map, I've got the survey, the story map, the dashboard, and the web mapping application with the interactive ArcGIS Online web map in it. So that's one powerful thing. The second powerful thing, I think the second powerful message is that that whole thing took me 4 class periods to create, 4 hours basically. So we're not talking days, weeks to create these things. Sure, there are things in GIS that require a deeper, steeper learning curve, but many of these tools, especially for you educators out there, are very accessible to students, and they teach not just the technology, they teach patterns of critical thinking, spatial thinking, problem solving, you're working with real data, etc. I've got other story maps here that are besides my walkability map that I invite you to take a look at, including Cowboy Boots of Wimberley, Texas. These boots are made for walking. And I also have some phone mapping applications as well, including Survey 123. It's an app as well. You can actually install it and run it. You can also collect data for a Survey 123 just in a web browser, but it looks a little bit nicer in the app. Mapillary, so mapping places like a Google Street View, but citizen science. So you can create a Google Street View or Trail View like experience with just your phone and the Mapillary app. They are a Esri business partner, some good folks over there. All right, it's time for some music. I'm going to the field, baby, don't you want to go? I'm going to the field, baby, don't you want to go? I'm going to collect some data in citizen science mode. I'm going where the Wi-Fi's far behind. I'm going to where the Wi-Fi's far behind. But that's okay, because we can collect data offline. Oh, that's a good one. Going to the field. What about this? I look at my maps and I see they need tending while my device gently beeps. Ooh, that was so bad. All right, GIS crossword puzzle. This is a fun way of getting people excited about geospatial technology, if they've got a little background in this. So what do we do with this crossword puzzle? I have 400 clues in this crossword puzzle. I've got a essay in the Esri community going. And in this crossword puzzle, this is just a section of it. So you could use this whole thing. I got the whole thing as a PDF. You could print it, you could export it, you could embed it in a website, etc. I also have the answers, but no peeking, okay? But let me give you a few clues. Okay, this is an easy one. 69 down. University of Kansas cartographer George, who devised the natural breaks classification. I know that's pretty geeky, but I think many of you will get that. Think about that for a moment. What about this? The standard deviation of residuals or prediction errors. Ooh, okay, what about 69 down, the one I just mentioned earlier? That is George Jenks, the Jenks natural breaks classification method. Longtime cartographer at the University of Kansas. Rock chalk. Okay, what about 40 across? Type of thematic map in which area is symbolized in proportion to a variable that represents a summary of a geographic characteristic within each area. I know that's a lot of words, but choropleth map, right? Choropleth map. Feel free to dig into the entire crossword puzzle. Sadly, we don't have time here to dig into the whole thing, but that's one of a series of things I have for events, icebreakers, things like that, that kind of get people excited about mapping and geotechnology. So remember, mapping is not the end goal. The end goal is to understand something in a deeper, richer way so we can make smarter decisions about it, not just mapping my data. Oftentimes people send me their URLs. Hey, Joseph, I've got my data on a map. Great, I'll say, and? Why do I say and? Because the map is not the final endpoint. The endpoint is to understand something in a deeper, richer way, and perhaps to encourage people to take action about it. It being the thing that you're mapping or studying. Urban greenways, public art, community gardens, graffiti, invasive weeds in your community, dangerous intersections, water quality, weather. I mean, you name it. The sky's the limit with these tools. But that's one of the ideas, is to help people be engaged in issues in their community. And that might lead to additional questions, and the geographic inquiry process continues. Okay, so that's really the end goal. I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward here. Now, Landforms Quiz. This is new this year. I've got a Landforms Quiz that I hope will be of interest to you. Let's get into this. Okay, so we've got a Landforms Quiz. One of the things that I wanted to do with this Landforms Quiz is to get you thinking about additional story maps tools that have come out in the last few months. One of which, this is geomorphology focused, one of which is actually something called map actions. Map actions. So for example, if I go to the left side of this story map, it's got map actions. So I can say, ooh, big sky country, name this feature. What is this, a Piedmont, alluvial fan, or a landslide? Think about that for a moment. But notice how the map actions work. If I click in this box, see this same feature at 100,000 scale. I'm zoomed out, and now I'm looking at a US Geological Survey 1 to 100,000 scale map and how it's different from the 1 to 24,000 scale map. So I've got a fewer number of contours, or ISO lines of elevation is what they are. See the same feature at 1 to 250,000. Okay, what if I did that? Now I'm zoomed out a little bit more, so I've got a smaller scale and a bigger distance between each contour line. Same feature, now I'm not seeing it as well. Now to the Atlantic coast. Name this feature. Is it a peninsula, a tombolo, or an isthmus? All right, time doesn't permit us to go to all of these landforms questions, but I hope you're sensing that, okay, map actions and story maps are an effective way to teach concepts and to explore features, could be human or cultural features or physical features on the landscape. And this is all from USGS Topo Maps. Now, some of you have known me for years, and you know that I used to go around to conferences with a humongous roll of USGS Topo Maps to teach this same concept, to teach these landforms. That was kind of clunky. I used to have to carry that thing on the airplane and all that kind of thing. Now I've got it in a story map. Okay, so what was that first one? That was an alluvial fan. That is the famous Ennis, Montana alluvial fan. Isn't that a beauty? That's a beauty. I love that one. And the second one is a tombolo here off of Lynn, Massachusetts. So story maps, map actions, take a look at that. There's some documentation on how to create these. And I'm using it as a quiz, kind of in a fun way, but I do have the answers at the end of each one of these. I've got about 25 questions there. We don't have time to go through it all. William Shakespeare loved maps and GIS. Well, prove it to me, Joseph. You say, well, what about King Henry IV? A plague upon it, I have forgot the map. I love that. All right, let's talk about geography and mapping related books over the last maybe 18 months as people are maybe hopefully reading more. Right, as you're in your home offices oftentimes. I'm on track to reading 80 books this year. I know many of you are avid readers, and I would just encourage you, visit your public library. What's not to love about the public library? You can get books on interlibrary loan in most public libraries for free if they don't have it actually in that public library collection. But right now, I mentioned earlier, I'm reading The Age of Violence by Alastair Bonnet. Phil Brick's book, In the Eye of the Hurricane, was fascinating. History, geography. One of the reasons why the French sent their fleet to Virginia in 1781, which of course worked out really well for the Americans, is that there was a series of devastating hurricanes in the Caribbean where the French had many of their ships the prior year. Ooh, physical geography, hurricanes, Caribbean. We cannot keep our ships in the Caribbean. We will send them to Virginia. That's a very bad French accent, but the point is, geography is important in historical events. Also, there's an Indian author that lives in England now, but she wrote a book called Around the World in 80 Trains, And she went to fascinating places that I think for us in the geo community, if I was teaching cultural geography right now, I'd actually have my students read wide sections of this book because her insights, she goes into North Korea on a train, and to Thailand and to Vietnam. I mean, on a train. And to Kazakhstan and on back to England. Fascinating. Around the World in 80 Trains. I love that. And I've got it checked out from the library, but then someone else had it on reserve, so I had to turn it back in. So I'm not quite done, so I'm going to check it out again. But The Atlas of Extinct Countries. This is a very tongue-in-cheek kind of a telling of countries that have existed or people setting up their own country and you know, how well or how badly that went over the centuries. Really fascinating. My favorite geography related books of all time are still as follows. The Mapmaker's Wife, which is about the French surveying team that went down to Ecuador in 1730 to try to measure how wide the Earth was between each degree of longitude to figure out if the Earth was a oblate spheroid or a prolate spheroid. Fascinating. And also Longitude by Dava Sobel, which probably many of you have read about the invention of the longitude clock that enabled ships to figure out what longitude they were at so that they could figure out what their position was and wouldn't, you know, bust up on a bunch of rocks that they didn't know existed right there. And all books from Eric Larson, Isaac Storm, Dead Wake, about the Lusitania, and many others. Isaac Storm is about the Galveston hurricane of 1900. And Simon Winchester, I love Simon Winchester's books. I mean, he immerses himself in research for an entire year and doesn't do anything else because he can do that. He's sold enough books where he doesn't have to have a non-author job. I don't have it on this particular story map, but I read the newest book from his back in January, and that's called Land, simply Land. And it begins with him purchasing a piece of land in New York State and speculating, do I really own this land? What does ownership really mean anyway? And how do I take care of this property now that's sort of in my stead? And talks about land ownership and how it's viewed around the world over space and over time, over the centuries. How do we view land ownership? Andrea Wolf, I met her at the ESRI User Conference, and The Invention of Nature is all about Alexander von Humboldt from the 1860s, 1870s, German explorer, went all the way to China when he was 59, on foot and partly on horseback and partly on elephant. Anyway, fascinating to be able to read about Alexander von Humboldt. David McCullough, I love his books. And I'm also rather fond of Interpreting Our World, which is my own book about the revolutionary nature of geography.